Welcome to Steam at Work. This is the first volume in a continuing series that blends archive footage of working trains from the golden age of steam with a day-in-the-life look at the operations of some of the leading preserved lines of today. The East Somerset Railway, or Strawberry Line, runs from Cranmore to Mendip Vale. In 1971, Cranmore was derelict, but after 4 years of hard work by a volunteer force, the 2-mile line was opened for business. The founder is the celebrated artist David Shepherd, whose wonderful paintings of animals, aircraft and trains have delighted enthusiasts the world over. Laurie Hopkins is one of the volunteers.
This particular locomotive was built at Brighton in about 1875. She was originally named Burgundy when she came into service, and obviously over the years she's exterior wise she hasn't changed all that much. She carries a Bagnall boiler and firebox, which was fitted during her time in service on the Cannock colliery system in Staffordshire. The cab fittings, as you can see, are removed. We are planning in the not too distant future, she's got to have some work done on the inner firebox, which is copper, and of course has got rather tired. Right, now this engine is a London Midland Scottish Ginty, or as it used to be known as a Class 3F shunting or trip working locomotive, also built in about the mid-1930s. Its last working depot was Speke Junction in Liverpool, and she's rather unique in the fact that she's got a screw reverser rather than one of the old type lever reversers. This particular locomotive is a Barclay locomotive, 14-inch cylinder, and built in Kilmarnock, also in the 1930s. And at the present moment in time, she's undergoing a retube, and probably we're looking at about a 6-week job to get her back.
Dick Belchamber has the job every schoolboy wants. He's the driver.
You see the 2 gauges start to rise. And when we've got about 23 on both sides, we can then start thinking about taking the handbrake off, and we'll be ready to go. Do you want me to give you a dip? Please, yeah. Right, let's put the thing into 4th gear, and away we go. Put it into reverse gear. Make sure the fireman's on. Okay. Release the brake, and away we go. Keep your eye out at the other end of the platform, Dave. Yeah. Whistle enough to make sure we're all clear on the foot crossing. It is all clear. speed up until we get to the point where I've got to stop, obviously, at the stop board. Dave will get down with the token to let me out. Right, we now stop the loco at the stop board. He'll give me the right of way, I'll acknowledge him, let the brake off, and off we go. One token. Right. Obviously I'm not allowed to go until I've seen that he's got the token with him. Once the vacuums come back, I'll go. And off we go, back down to the train. Stop about 6 foot short just to make sure we can, and that we're in full control, and then just gently roll on. Screw down the brake, go underneath, hook up, just turn the vacuum off, gets rid of that horrible noise. Put it back into mid-gear. And open the drain cocks. And that's it. And Dave the fireman's going to get off and hook us up. He's just taken off the vac bags. Getting his steam pipes ready because we've got the steam heat on today. It's still March, so it's a fairly cool day. Unfortunately not a lot of room with these corridor end connections and all these pipes and things. He's just hooking up the steam pipes together, making sure the clips are well in. Getting the hook up, make sure we're securely fixed to the train. Screwing it up reasonably tight, although it doesn't need to be over tight because we did squeeze onto the train a little bit. And then the two pipes that he's now got to fix up with a vacuum pipe for the train braking system. It's a foolproof system so that if the loco ever broke away from the train, these two pipes would obviously break apart, causing the brakes on the train and on the loco to come on, and hopefully bringing us to a safe stop.
It was decided amongst our shareholders that the locomotive would reflect a Great Western locomotive of the 1920s, and the current paint scheme is, we like to think, representative of that era. We started rebuilding it in probably 1982, and it steamed successfully in March of 1998. The last year has been spent 3 months on the Swanage and Swanage Railway, and since July of 1998 on the East Somerset Railway. You have to have a passion for railway steam locomotives, you have to have a feeling for them, and I suppose we're of a generation who remember the steam engine, and we wish to own and restore our own working engine.
Fireman's job, as everyone knows, is to keep the fire alight, but he's got a lot of other jobs to do while he's on the loco. He acts as my lookout. He's another pair of eyes on the other side of the loco. He also has to keep the water up at all times, because we must keep water in the boiler, as indicated by the water level over on the gauge glass there. That is the most important gauge on the loco, because without water the loco becomes a very dangerous device. The water actually cools all the plate work of the loco to avoid it melting when the fire becomes very hot. And I would think we're nearly there.
Right, that's it.
Right, he's happy at that. And he's now about to put water into the boiler. Open the water valve, opening the steam valve. Just an adjustment on the water. When he hears the noise, he knows he's got water going into the boiler. Everything's ready. I just need to put myself into backward gear on the reverser, make sure the catch is right in, and I'll get the tip from my colleague when we're ready to go. By the way, can you take the handbrake off, please? I'll just get the vacuum to give him a hand. Handbrake is off. Toot on the whistle. And away we go. Open the regulator slightly. Ease the power in gently. Allow the reverser to come up to notch it up a bit. Uses the steam more economically by doing that. Unfortunately, I've got to keep turning around because we're running backwards at the moment.
For Sunday lunch or an unusual evening meal, the East Somerset wine and dine trains provide a meal with a difference.
Just here, we've got a lubricator. You may just catch a glimpse of a blob of oil going up. They're lubricating the engine, the actual cylinders and the valve at the front of the loco. The fireman can control the drafting on the fire. He's obviously got the door to do it with, and he's also got two dampers, which are two little levers poking up through the floor. When the loco's working, the chuffing that you hear on the outside is causing the fire to be drawn up by pulling through the smoke box and pulling air through the grate. And we'll shortly be plunging down, and it'll be just controlling the train on the brake all the way. The fireman's starting to prepare the loco for the return trip. He's actually starting to build his water level up again. I'm not using any steam, so the fire is more or less all his at the moment. Just now approaching the station at the far end of the line. There's ended bail. Nice gentle roll in. It's about a 2-mile run overall. You'll see the stop board at the end of the platform. And there we are. Just got a couple of colleagues who are going to take the token for me. All the points that we run over a lot, they're going to take the token.
Thanks.
and unlock it so that I can run round. Right away, okay.
She's got a typical Great Western bark, and of course with the small wheel diameter, she's mainly used for heavy haulage, but can get up to a fair speed. The locomotive is a member of what they call the Class 56, primarily built for hauling coal and colliery work from the valleys in South Wales down to the docks in Cardiff. Obviously, as time progressed under British Rail, these locomotives were diversified all over their system. They were split basically into two classes, 56 and 66 variety. Obviously this one is a 56, built at Swindon in the 1930s, and was one of the ex-Barry scrapyard locos which has been rebuilt.
One of the problems you've got on a line like this is we've just been coming up the hill, working hard, using water of course, but all the water's been sitting down at the back of the loco. We're now going over the top, we're now going to slope down, the water's going to go to the front of the loco, makes a difference of about 3 inches or so in the gauge glass, and we must make sure that that water level is up at all times where we can see it. All appears to be well, it's bobbing at about a third height. This brake valve I'm using is one of the parts of the loco that isn't copied on the original. It's a fairly simple valve I'm using, but it's doing exactly the same as the original fitting would have done. Back at Cranmore Station. Just gently rolling down through. Handbrake on. Right. Put the loco into mid gear. Open the drain cocks. Stops any build up of pressure at the cylinders if there is any leakage, and turn off the ejector. And there we're all nice and quiet again. And that's the end of another run.
Until recently, the East Somerset owned and exhibited a Class 7 loco, number 390, which was presented to David Shepherd by President Kayunda of Zambia. The engine and sleeping car escaped through Rhodesia and cemented Britain's close ties with African railways. In the late 1800s, a rich and important African country was Rhodesia, which owed its name and development to the railway-minded imperialist Cecil Rhodes. He had a vision of a Cape to Cairo railway, which was never actually completed over its proposed length, but it did represent a tribute to the building capabilities of the British. Locomotive works were quickly established in Rhodesia to assemble and maintain the engines and rolling stock for the new railway, which was supervised by British engineers. The system grew very quickly. A track-laying record was set when 492 miles of track were laid in just 500 working days. The construction trains carried a vast and inexpensive labour force who made up the bulk of the track-laying gangs.
Here we see the Union Express leaving Cape Town for Kimberley. The first section of this great railway was laid as far back as 1860 and built as far as Wellington, some 57 miles distant. In 1885, the extension to Kimberley was completed, the distance from Cape Town being 720 miles. But Rhodes decided to go ahead with the Beira to Bulawayo extension, which, entirely with the aid of British capital, was completed in 1902, joining the Cape to Cairo main route, which had reached there 5 years previously. The mineral wealth of southern Rhodesia has now been proved to be enormous and includes many rich copper deposits. This is Bulawayo, now a prosperous township, situated 1,360 miles from Cape Town.
The spectacular Victoria Falls Bridge with its 500-foot central span was built in 1904 by the Cleveland Bridge and Engineering Building Company of Darlington. This huge railway system represented just a small part of the spread of British technology around the world. Another privately owned and run railway is the Kent and East Sussex, which has had a glorious rebirth after its demise in 1954. Commercial manager Graham Hewkins is just the right man to look back on its checkered career.
The line was built in 1900, which is very, very late for railways. It was the first light railway in the country, built to reach areas that have been missed out in railway mainly of the 1840s and 1850s. So it connected Robertsbridge in East Sussex with Headcorn in Kent. Made very modest profits at the initially, but because it was built very cheaply, the stations were usually a way away from the villages they were supposed to serve. So it was very vulnerable to road competition from the 1920s onwards. Started losing money in 1926, struggled on through the war when it became an important secondary route to the coast, taking lots of materials down to the south coast when the main lines were affected by bombing. And then after the war it was nationalised and became part of British Railways for 6 brief years. When they decided that it couldn't go on running uneconomic trains, and it closed in 1954.
A group was formed with the aim of reopening the line from Tenderton to Robertsbridge. This attempt failed, but after a protracted legal battle that involved taking the Transport Minister of the day to court, the 3-mile section from Tenderton to Bodiam was saved. The task of acquiring locos and rolling stock had begun with a vengeance, and the existing overgrown track had to have a major clean-up. One of the earliest acquisitions was an 060T Terrier locomotive, No. 3, Bodiam, built in 1872. The first section to be reopened was from Tenderton to Rolvenden, which was formally opened in 1974 with Terrier Sutton No. 3 2650 banked with bodium. Today, the Kent and East Sussex is a thriving light railway with over 20 locos.
The other engine that you've seen today is number 24 Rolvenden. It was built in 1953 by the Hunslet Locomotive Company of Leeds, but to a wartime design. In the Second World War, it was very quickly realised that there was a need for an all-purpose small shunting engine that could be built cheaply, that would haul heavy loads and that was easy to maintain. And it was the Hunslet austerity design that was adopted. It actually proved very, very successful, so rather than just being used for the wartime, building continued until 1964, by which time around 464 of the engines had been built, and the Army and the National Coal Board used them extensively after the war. We've got 3 saved here at the Kent and East Sussex Railway, number 24, number 23 Holman F. Stevens, named after the engineer that built and ran the line, and number 25 Northium, and they're very reliable and very good engines. It reopened in 1974, and initially trains ran for just 2 miles from Tenterden Town Station to Rolvenden. And since then we've extended the line in stages, and we now run for 7 miles to Northiam. And in the year 2000 we'll actually extend for a further 3 miles and run trains to Bodiam and provide a park and ride service with the National Trust Castle at Bodiam. The line couldn't run without volunteers. There are about 15 paid members of staff and about 400 volunteers, so that gives you sort of a feel for the scale of the work that's achieved by the voluntary staff. Everything from driving the engines to making the sandwiches in the station refreshment rooms, volunteers do it all. First is number 65, which was built in 1943 by the Vulcan Iron Works in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It was shipped across the Atlantic in kit form as part of the preparations for D-Day. Similar engines were actually then transported across the Channel, but number 65 and its partner number 238 that are here at the Kent and East Sussex Railway didn't see action in the war, and afterwards they went to first Southampton docks and then later to the Ashford Wagon Works, where they were used as shunting engines before they were saved for preservation here at the Kent and East Sussex Railway.
Driving is sort of less energetic than a fireman, but it's quite nice to be in charge of all that power, and you look back and see the train snaking behind you and think, oh, I'm driving all this lot. There's quite a lot of it. You probably use about half a tonne of coal a trip, something like that, to do a 14-mile round trip. It's about half a tonne. You burn about 1.5 tonnes to 2 tonnes in a day usually on an engine like the one behind me.
Okay.
Because the line was built as a light railway, it was built as cheaply as possible. So instead of indulging in expensive things like cuttings and embankments, the line was really laid along the land that was there, which means we've got some very sharp curves and steep gradients. So the engines really have to work for their living here. They've got to pull heavy trains up very steep hills, and so they're really earning their keep well into their retirement, rather than just sort of being put out to grass and shuffling along level ground.
The Kent and East Sussex Railway seems to offer a great day out for all the family as it snakes its way through the luscious Kent countryside. The end of the line is at Northiam, which, like all the other stations, has been rebuilt and dressed to look as 1940s as possible. In the summer, it is not unusual to find the odd cow on the line, which doesn't help the trains to keep to their timetable. The fireman has the extra duty of moving the cows away. But nobody seems to mind, as it's all part of the fun to be had in the Garden of England.
It feels like you're moving, doesn't it? Oh, it's so briny, darling. I'll go move.
Blockage of railways by landslips in cuttings are not rare, but normally they can be rapidly cleared. After all, the sides of cuttings and embankments are engineered with the possibility of landslips in mind. However, when the cutting is made through chalk, it is, for all intents and purposes, through solid rock, and costs can be minimised by making the sides steeper than through soft earth. Yet chalk is capable of being softened by water, and like any rock, split by frost. The stretch of the Southern Railway main line between Folkestone and Dover runs close to the sea through a succession of tunnels and under steep chalk cliffs along the seashore. Minor chalkfalls are very frequent, and safe passage of trains is maintained by the signals being set to danger when control wires are broken. The landslip of the 28th of November 1939 involved a 20,000-ton fall, but it was not difficult to clear because the chalk could be moved seawards to make an apron of reclaimed land. Good use was made of this as a platform during the recent construction of the Channel Tunnel. However, the 1939 fall occurred in midwinter, and owing to the blackout, clearance work was confined to the short daylight period and was not completed until the 7th of January 1940. Much more recently, on the Isle of Wight, early in 1966, a major fall of chalk on the line to Ventnor was felt no longer economic to clear, and so the island line was prematurely closed south of Shanklin. Another line in the south of England is the Swanage branch, which ran from Swanage on the southern tip of the Isle of Purbeck near Bournemouth, past Corfe Castle, and joined the main Weymouth to London line just before Wareham. Like most rural branch lines, it suffered greatly from the beaching cuts. But during the 60s, double-header Rail Club special excursions were offered and could often be seen plying up and down the line. These 2MT 262 tanks were designed by Fairburn and slightly modified by Ivert for general branch line work. 130 were built between December 1946 and May 1962, and like the 260s, they were put to work over most of the LMS system, except in Scotland. "34004 Yeovil was one of the new West Country Light Pacifics, built at Brighton in 1945, but rebuilt later. On this tour it was banked by one of the British Rail standard 4MT 264Ts. Two of them are preserved on the Swanage Railway, but not 80146. The design was from a very successful LMS, one of Stanya's. They were larger engines than the 2MT 262Ts, having 225-pound boilers, 18 by 28-inch cylinders, 5-foot 8-inch wheels, and a tractive effort, or TE, of 25,100 pounds. 34004 ended its days in July 1967, working from Bournemouth Shed. Blackmore Vale was one of the earlier West Countries that was never rebuilt. It's banked by a standard 260-76026. 34023 went to Nine Elms, but the class soon showed the capability of working heavy mainline expresses and was used as the Bournemouth Belle and the Cunarder boat train, along with bigger engines. It ended its days with BR back at Nine Elms, and it was one of the final survivors as it worked a farewell to steam special from Waterloo before being withdrawn in 1967. Another steam special was 35028, one of the big Merchant Navy class engines, Clan Line. It was withdrawn from service in July 1967 with over 794,000 miles on the clock. As early as 1963, the Swanage branch had felt the icy wind of Dr. Richard Beeching's infamous Report on Railways. This, in effect, was a hatchet to the British rail lines. The Swanage branch was closed on the morning of the 3rd of January 1972. There was then a statutory 6-month limbo period before British Rail could tear up the track. The Swanage Railway Society fought tooth and nail to stop the railway carnage, but to the day the contractors moved in and ripped up the track. British Rail wanted £115,000 for the 7 miles of trackbed and heavily worn track between Swanage and Fursbrook, as well as £11,500 for the loss of interest on the scrap value. The Swanage Railway Society had agreed to pay the scrap value after an independent valuation had come up with a realistic figure of only £50,000, and they complained that they had been sold down the river as the contractors continued their work. Many of the wooden sleepers had been sold to Mr. Hallett of Ridge, while the concrete sleepers were kept by British Rail and transported to Wareham Station for storage. But they were found to be unsuitable and were later sold on to the Severn Valley Railway. After years of constant campaigning by the Society, the Dorset County Council agreed to 6.5 miles of trackbed between Fursbrook and Swanage being used as a railway again. A referendum in 1975 revealed that a massive 83% of Swanage people wanted the trains back. More track laying was allowed in 1976, and in May 1979 the County Council finally agreed to the project. Ironically, the Society brought the sleepers back from Mr. Hallett. 1990 was a watershed as the track was extended towards Corfe Castle. In fact, a track-laying binge by the volunteers extended the line over half a mile in just 14 days. Volunteers had to fight long and hard for every inch of ground and for each painful step forward. Because of British Rail's initial intransigence, everything had to be imported and rebuilt from scratch. Rails, sleepers, track chairs, signalling, and every nut and bolt that goes into making a railway. One day it is hoped to link up again with the main line at Wareham, just as in the past. Up until the recent electrification of the Dorset Way line between Bournemouth and Weymouth, electric multiple unit through carriages from Waterloo had a Class 33 Crompton type diesel attached at Bournemouth in a rare push-pull formation. This provided the onward motive power for the journey westwards to Weymouth. The Crompton locomotive is itself now a heritage diesel, having finally been withdrawn from National Railway service in late 1998. By 1993, Swanage Station was well and truly operational. 30053 with its duty number 392 on a white disc, used here instead of lamps during the daylight, is one of the oldest locos to survive. It is a passenger tank engine of class M7, which first appeared in 1897. It was designed by Dougal Drummond for the London and South Western Railway and probably worked on the suburban services into Waterloo until it was ousted by the electrification that began in 1915. It is a remarkably powerful engine for a 4-coupled tank. It has 5-foot 7-inch wheels and a TE of 19,755 pounds. It was capable of working semi-fast trains from Waterloo to Reading. .41712 is ancient in engine terms. It is an 060T designed by Johnson on the Midland Railway in 1878, although it was rebuilt with a Belpaire boiler some 40 years later. The lamp on the front tells the signalman what type of train it is. For example, one lamp at the top indicates that it is a stopping passenger train. Because of the steep climb out of Swanage, a double header is often used with the smaller engines. The train comprises a 4-wheeled parcel van, a bullied saloon, a Southern Railway saloon coach, and a brake composite or brake third.
have turned them on occasion when I've been sent to
Yeah,
The second of this double header, 30075, is an American 060T with a difference. It was built in Yugoslavia and was copied from another engine without the American drawings. It has been given the bogus British rail number 30075. The end of the train has a flat wagon for heavy loads and a heavy southern brake van. Another very rare engine is this ex-LMS 060 tank with outside cylinders. Designed by Fowler with small 3-foot 11-inch wheels, it was built solely for the shunting in the narrow confines of the docks. Equally unusual is the bogie hopper wagon, which can carry 50 tons of limestone. To see a triple header was a very unusual sight in normal operations, but the trains on the Swanage line can be a lot longer and heavier than they would have been in the old British Rail days. But what of the future for this brave railway?
The Swanage Railway, the railway was closed by British Rail in 1972, and the track bed was destined to be used as a bypass for Corfe Castle. However, the Railway Society, or the Swanage Railway Society as it was then, was beginning to make its presence felt, and people began to realise that there was definitely, they were serious about restoring the line. And the local, Dorset County Council purchased the track bed, and eventually they decided that the railway was going somewhere, and therefore plans to put the bypass along the track bed were put aside, and alternative routes were looked at on either side of the village. With the railway now embarking on this, with the help of the local authority, this very imaginative park and ride scheme at Norden, which is proving very successful, the need for a bypass around Corfe is becoming less of a necessity because of the number of cars that are now using the park and ride to park their cars there and actually coming and visiting Corfe Castle and Swanage and the surrounding area by train. The car park at Norden was actually was built by the district council, Purbeck District Council, with grant money from the Rural Development Commission and the Countryside Commission. It was originally built with 125 spaces. It has recently been doubled in size to 250, and the visitor centre has been built using local the local Dorset Cobb building procedures, and together with toilets and a children's play area. And I understand that a further expansion is now planned, which hopefully will be available in 2000, whereby they will actually bring the total car parking space at Norden to up to 500 spaces. Well, the basic aims of the Swanage Railway and indeed the Southern Steam Trust, which is the controlling charity behind the operation, is to preserve a living record of Southern Steam in its heyday in the 50s and early 60s. All our stations we are restoring in as near the sort of late 50s as they were. Corfe Castle Station is a particular example which has been lovingly recreated entirely by volunteers to as it was in the 1950s. And we are charged also with trying to acquire rolling stock and locomotives of the area and before, which we can preserve and use as we need to in the future. And alongside that, of course, we feel very much that we are part of the transport policy of the area and are indeed playing a vital part. So hopefully that the revenue that we earn in the day-to-day running of the railway by actually moving passengers will help to go to preserving historical stock, which can be brought out on high days and holidays and be there for future generations to enjoy. We've reached Norden. There's about a mile of track bed still to lay before we actually physically link up with the main line, and there has been formed what is called the Purbeck Rail Partnership, which encompasses the Purbeck District Council, Dorset County Council, Countryside Commission, Rural Development Commission, ourselves and Railtrack. We are all talking, they're sort of talking at the moment, as to the future of the link-up, because the local authorities want the link-up, we want the link-up, but it's a question of how best it can be obtained, and they're talking to train operating companies, Railtrack, etc., with a view to how best this can be done to the benefit of everybody.
.30053 was acquired by a museum in the USA after its withdrawal, but the scheme failed and the engine was brought back to the UK in the late 1980s. It was restored at Swindon in 1989 and now belongs to the Drummond Locomotive Society. Undoubtedly, one of the stars of the Swanage Railway is the Battle of Britain class 257 Burma Squadron. This class was the same as the West Countries, but got their names because they worked in Kent on boat trains and ordinary expresses to London. It stayed on the eastern section until 1961, then went down to the West Country. The Western region took over at Exeter in 1963 and began to withdraw unrebuilt Pacifics and introduced their diesel hydraulics, so Exmouth Junction lost all of its steam express trains at the end of the summer of 1964. Consequently, 34072 was withdrawn and sent to the wonderful scrapyard at Barry. But by this time Mr. Woodhams had discovered the advantages of selling his expired steam engines to enthusiasts, rather than consigning them to steel furnaces. Thank goodness such elegant locos as this have been preserved and still serve a grateful community. The Swanage story is one of great perseverance and immense courage. It deserves to succeed. Finally, let's travel from Swanage to the other end of the line and perhaps remember all the blood, sweat and tears that have gone into every inch of the Swanage Railway. The North Yorkshire Moors Railway is one of the most historic lines in the north of England. Its origins go back well over a century and a half to Georgian times. The first part of the line from Whitby to Gromont was opened on the 8th of June 1835. Today Gromont boasts its headquarters and engine sheds where the locos are prepared for the day's work ahead. They are fired very early in the morning, cleaned and steamed up. The most powerful 080 in Britain is number 901, designed by Sir Vincent Raven and built at Darlington in 1919. It was restored by the North Eastern Preservation Group in 1991. But what gives it such power?
The steam's transferred from the boiler to the cylinders. What you see me doing now is the necessary rods and valve gear that eventually drive the wheels from the cylinders. The valves are situated above the cylinders there, and this is the driving axle across here, and all the gubbins that go with it, the eccentrics, the big ends. This main one in the middle is what is driven off the cylinder there, and that's what drives this axle. And it's got two outside cylinders as well, and they drive the outside axle, part of the axle here. And the remainder are just like labour intensive parts that need oiling up each day. On the more modern engines it's grease and oil, not what we do now. It's quite an old engine, this one. There's quite a lot of oiling points on it. So that's what you'll see me doing now. I'll do the inside and the outside. There's three cylinders there. The steam goes into them, and it's controlled by these valves into which cylinder it goes into. It's given three cylinders to give it extra power, to receive steam 3 times on 1 revolution of the wheel, which makes it more powerful than a 2-cylinder engine. And the engine also exhausts steam 6 times to 1 revolution of the wheel, in consequence with it. Quite a powerful engine, this one.
Can I borrow my glove back, sir? Exchange no robbery. There.
When the loco is ready, the driver of the day makes a final call to headquarters before setting out under the tunnel towards Gromont Station to pick up his train.
Draw the head out of the back.
901 first worked from Blaydon Shed over to Carlisle and up to York on heavy coal and coke trains, but from 1923 it hauled export coal from Dairycoats Shed at Hull. In 1928 it went to Haverton Hill, Stockton in 1931, and then West Hartlepool for heavy steelworks traffic. In 1935 it went to South Shields, and during the Second World War it pulled iron ore up to the Consett Steelworks. The North Yorkshire Moors Railway also runs a goods service. 65894 was the very last NER 060. It was built at Darlington in September 1923, originally designed by Wilson Wurzel in 1905. 901 is a North Eastern Railway Class T3 or LNER Q7. Q7s also worked from the Tyne Docks to Newport Yard and then went much further afield during the war to Liverpool, Grantham or Edinburgh. 901 became number 3460 in 1946, then changed to 63460 in 1951 before its withdrawal from service in 1962. But as the epitome of the NER goods engine, it was preserved. At Gromont, turning a loco around is quite a complicated business because of the level crossing at the end of the station. These J27s were a smaller edition of the Q6 and Q7 080s with the same 4-foot 7¼ wheels, 2 inside cylinders and a TE of 24,640 pounds. "901 gains speed as it goes through Gromont Yard and up the line towards Pickering. On a fine summer's day, the Yorkshire countryside is breathtaking. There are 3 stops up the line. Levisham has had many starring roles in films and television. Brideshead Revisited, All Creatures Great and Small, Poirot, and Sherlock Holmes, to name but a few. Number 65894 started out as 2392 and was renumbered in 1946 and 1951. It was one of 12 allocated to York Shed until 1943, when it went to Neville Hill, Leeds, for many years, and then back to York and finally to Sunderland, where it was withdrawn in 1967 before its fine restoration and loving attention on the North Yorkshire Moors Railway. Gromont's main locomotive shed was built in 1973. There is a viewing gallery where the public can watch backstage. A running shed and fabrication shop was added so that the locos and rolling stock could be rebuilt on the spot.
Green.
It was in February 1978 that the National Railway Museum took 901 into its reserve collection for 2 months, before it was loaned to the North Eastern Preservation Group, who gradually restored it to working order at Gromont. Like many preserved railways, there are splendid views and walks to be had near the lines. Goathland Station has changed very little since it was first opened in 1865. But to celebrate its 150th anniversary, the Scarborough Borough Council installed an authentic north-eastern footbridge from Howden on the Tyne and Wear Metro. The railway has a large stock of locos, including this 210O Dame Vera Lynn and the 280S 160 USA. Both were built for wartime duties overseas. On the approach to the southern end of the line at Pickering, many restored carriages and rolling stock line the route. Pickering Station was designed by George Townsend Andrews in 1845. It too has a footbridge from another northeastern railway station, which was put in as late as 1996. The Whitby-Pickering line had been another beaching casualty in 1965, as it was deemed to be uneconomical. But a small group of local people called a meeting in June 1967 and formed the North Yorkshire Moors Preservation Society.
Yeah, about 10 or 11 of us got together and formed the railway in the first place. In the early days I helped to build up the railways. I was head of operating department for a lot of years, but I've dropped out of that now. I want to retire. Now I still kept on the fundraising officer's job.
The path to the line's success was not an easy one, but it runs very efficiently now. Perhaps there may be plans to extend its 24 miles even further in the future.
Quite honestly, I can't see, unless it's something very drastic, as getting any further than Pickering, because it's cut off now. The railway has been covered up by a road. There's no way out. But what I would like to do is for us to go from the other end, from Gromont down into Whitby. That would then complete the whole of the George Stephenson Railway, the Whitby-Pickering Railway. It has its own coat of arms in the old days, when it started off. Mind you, it was horse-drawn in those days. The old tunnel at Gromont, the old tunnel, the small one, is the one that is the horse-drawn tunnel which remains today. The post office and buildings there are the old station buildings and the stables, etc.
George Stephenson himself could never have foreseen volunteers running what amounts to his original line with these powerful steam locomotives well into the year 2000 and beyond. At the other end of the line, WD 3672 Dame Vera Lynn reverses onto her train. She was derived from the very successful LMS 8F280 of William Stanier, and the austerity or no-frills designs were built specifically for wartime use. Some of these engines were used in the Middle East and on the continent. In Europe and America, air brakes were the norm. As well as vacuum ejectors, all these military heavies had to be fitted with Westinghouse brake pumps, which can usually be seen on the side of the smoke box. Another loco built for the Second World War is 2253 USA, which was built at the Great Baldwin Locomotive Works at Philadelphia in 1943. It's put to work in Britain at the LNER shed Neville Hill, Leeds. It was used for heavy goods duties from that June until it was sent over to France in September 1944. The S-160s initially worked all the ambulance trains, and many, including 2253, were fitted with steam heating pipes. After the war in 1945, more than 500 S-160s were loaned to the French and over 200 to the Belgian railways. This particular engine found its way to Poland and became PKP number TR289 before it was eventually brought back to Britain and renumbered. A staggering total of 2,120 280s were built, but 2253 is one of the very few remaining examples still running. Unlike the American austerities, the majority of the British WD-280s were brought back and put to work by British Railways, almost until the end of the steam age. Far longer than they were designed to last. Dame Vera Lynn is one of the stars of the railway, especially during its wartime weekend in October each year. Goathland is also a famous television location, as it has often been featured as Aidensfield in Heartbeat. Just like its sister, Dame Vera Lynn, 90775 is another WD Class 210 built in 1943. It saw service with the British Army in Egypt during the war. Towards the end of a long working day, 901 makes its way back towards its home at Gromont. In the yard, Blue Peter receives due care and attention. She was named after Lord Rosebery's 1939 Derby winner, and not the children's television show. 532 is a 6-foot 2-inch Pacific designed by Peppercorn just after the war. She was built in Doncaster in 1948 and is therefore not strictly speaking an LNER locomotive, but it is the most modern LNER Pacific preserved so far. It has 3 cylinders, giving it a TE of 40,430 pounds, and like most modern Pacifics, it has a double chimney. Blue Peter spent most of its working life in Scotland, where there was a tradition of keeping crews and engines together. This magnificent express loco was withdrawn from service in 1966 and stored until it was bought privately by the Blue Peter Locomotive Society, who took it back to Doncaster for a complete overhaul in 1969. Blue Peter can be regularly seen on the North Yorkshire moors. As 901 finally draws into Gromont, it's worth remembering that the line is open from the end of March to the beginning of November every year. Perhaps the old wooden snowplough might get an airing during the cold winter months. A line that didn't survive was the Longmoor Military Railway, which closed down on the 31st of October 1969. A sad day for railway enthusiasts. Gordon and austerity tank 060 Earl Lonsdale had the honour of being the last trains to run. Until the line closed, there were daily passenger trains for army staff from Liss to Longmoor, but rarely had they been so full as on this nostalgic open day, when Gordon's train of vintage coaches was packed out. Right up to the birdcage of the southeastern coach, bringing up the rear. Many of these locomotives were sold to the LNER, which classified them as J94. Some 40 survived and are working on preserved lines to this day. During that era they were turned out in a typically military fashion, with white rims on their wheels. Longmoor's heyday was during the Second World War, when manpower rose from 500 in 1939 to over 2,000 in 1942. 27,000 Army railwaymen were trained at Longmoor each year. The railway also played host to 2 preserved Southern Pacifics, one being Clan Line, and David Shepherd's engine an added attraction at open days. But all was over as Lonsdale and Gordon shunted their carriages for the last time, heralding one of the final chapters in the Age of Steam. But Gordon was destined to have another life. The Severn Valley Railway in the Midlands is now the home of WD 210 Gordon, which exchanges tokens at the picturesque Highley station. Highley first became operational in 1862, remaining so until the line was axed in 1963. The Severn Valley Railway managed to restore and reopen it in 1974. Gordon was built by NBL at their Hyde Park works in Glasgow and delivered as WD number 3651 in December 1943. After running in at the LNER's Eastfield shed, it went straight onto the Longmoor Military Railway, where it was used for general duties, training and instruction. Hence the LMR on the tender, which does not stand for London Midland Region. It was named Gordon in 1952 and given the number WD 600, and for a time it was converted to oil burning for training men who would use oil burning locos in the Middle East. At the time of the Suez Crisis in 1956, it was manned by sappers as it worked a nightly freight via Liss to Southampton. Refired again, Gordon was the final survivor at Longmoor before it was closed down. It eventually found its way to the Severn Valley Railway, where it remains to this day.
Because you burn the coal so hot, it all comes out and it forms what we call clinker.
Is that hot?
No, otherwise I couldn't pick it up. Right, you see there's iron in it, right? There's all kinds of other bits and pieces, all kinds of things in it. And that forms what you could say is not like a pastry case, right? But when it does that, we can't get any air through the fire, so the coal won't burn again. So what we're doing is feeding it out, and that's basically what we're getting rid of. We can have pieces of this stuff 8 feet long.
Wow.
It's a big piece of clinker, that is.
This is the northern terminus of the Severn Valley Railway. We run trains every weekend throughout the year and every day from May to September. I'm the assistant station master here at Bridge North. I'm responsible for making sure that the trains leave when they should do. I'm in charge of the signalman on duty here. I'm responsible for any shunting moves that need to be done here. The railway first got off the ground in 1965, 2 years after it had been closed by Dr. Beeching, when a group of volunteers met at Kidderminster with a view to restoring the whole railway from Bewdley, through Bewdley to Kidderminster. Our first trains ran in 1970, just to Hampton Road, 4.5 miles away. Then we extended to Bewdley, and we finally made it to Kidderminster in 1984.
Most young boys go through a phase of wanting to be an engine driver. Severn Valley actually offers 3 courses to do just that on its Steam School Special. It offers you the opportunity to drive and fire the real thing at 3 different levels: introductory, intermediate and advanced.
I'm going to drift down the middle now, and as soon as the service is gone, do it whichever way, and then we're going to come on the back of it and forget it.
The Steam Supreme course involves hauling 7 or 8 coaches on a full round trip from Bridgnorth to Kidderminster and return. But most of the staff on the line are volunteers, just like Anthony Booth.
I'm a volunteer like all the other people who operate the railway. I myself started in 1974 as a travelling ticket inspector, became a guard in 1976, a signalman in 1979, and the assistant station master somewhere about the mid-80s. And that is roughly how most people progress up the ladder on the traffic side of the railway. The locomotive side, which is a completely separate department, operates in very much the same sort of way. The traditional locomotive bottom of the rung of starting as a cleaner, spending several years as a cleaner, then a past cleaner, fireman, past fireman, and eventually a driver, which will take anything up to about 15 years to achieve.
46521, the training school train, is a 2MT260, which was built at Swindon in 1953 and is part of the Severn Valley fleet. Double 714 is a 5.7XX class of 060 pannier tank design and was built to lot number 263 by Care Stewart and Company of Stoke-on-Trent for £3,160 in 1929. But apart from the trains, the signalmen are of prime importance on the railway.
My name's Paula Jones. I'm a volunteer signalman on the Severn Valley Railway. We're at Bridge North signal box at the moment. We're waiting for a train to come in at the moment, and all the roads set to bring this train into platform 1, which is running alongside the station buildings. Points are set, which are the black levers. These are facing point locks, which are blue levers, and the red ones are the signals. We use a cloth because if we didn't, these steel levers would suddenly become very rusty very quickly. So although it's not for blisters or to protect us, it's really to protect the lever. Train's coming in nicely under control, and I'm going to pull off another signal. Yeah. As I've got a trainee, he's gone to collect the token, and he'll get the 147 from the guard, which means that the train has arrived complete with the tail lamp. I'm only going to get one turn this month, and this is today. It's gone to the yard. It's quite responsible. You're responsible for the train and the passengers on it. And it's up to the old BR standards. If anything goes wrong, my neck is on the line.
Double 714 was withdrawn from British Rail in 1959 and sold to the Coal Board, where it was worked in the South Wales collieries before it was finally bought by the Severn Valley Railway in 1973. After a complete rebuild, she first steamed at Kidderminster on the 28th of July 1992. But today, Kidderminster is a fitting end of the line for steam at work.